Hi, hello. My name is Carl Birman, and thanks so much for uh, joining on my Zoom today. I'm with Jessica Ressler. She's a colleague attorney from White Plains, New York. Thanks so much, and hi, Jessica.
Good morning. How are you? It's nice to be here.
I'm great. So thank you for agreeing to participate today and do an interview with me. I'm really excited to chat with you, and you are a divorce lawyer based in White Plains. So I'm interested in your thoughts about some of the topical issues pertaining to child support. But before we get right into the nitty gritty of that, um, I always like to know how people got to where they are in their careers. So could you please tell our audience some turning point in your life that led you to become a lawyer, and what, the significance was of that?
Sure. I think it probably started when I was about 10 years old and I entered a contest to write a story with Storybook Publishing. And I wrote about my first experience at overnight camp in Canada. And I talked about the friends I had met, and I talked about my first time water skiing. And the book was primarily about trying new experiences and overcoming fears. And I was one of the winners of the contest when I was 10 years old. The book was published. And at that point in my life, I said, I really love to write. I want to find a career where I get to write. Um, and then fast forward, I applied to law school in New York, attended law school, graduated in 2002. And
Where,
then
where, where'd you go to law school?
I went to New York Law in downtown New York on Chambers Street. And then I practiced in private practice for about 10 years, doing all matrimonial and family law. I had clerked for Judge Silberman, which was an amazing experience during law school. And once I had done that, I said, that's it. I'm doing family law. I love it. And then about 10 years after I was admitted to practice, which was about early 2013, I opened up my own practice.
Now, how did you feel about going into the area of family law? Because for a lot of lawyers and obviously people going through family court or divorce, it's a stressful, emotional experience. How did you feel at the outset about choosing that kind of career for yourself?
I wanted something where I was going to be in the courtroom, but also have time in the office and doing some writing and having a lot of client contact. And the nice thing about family law is you get a lot of time in the courtroom and you get a lot of time in the office and you get that client contact and you get to write a lot, but you also get to argue. So it's a nice mix of
Mhm.
different skill sets. And you also learn about so many different areas of the law. I mean, there's so many cross sections and cases with criminal law, with immigration, with corporate, with tax. And so I love the fact that I'm not just practicing matrimonial law.
And what about for people who say, well, it's just too stressful. The clients are very emotional. The issues are very emotional, and it's just an excessive amount of stress. How do you respond to that when people ask you about that?
It is an excessive amount of stress at times. You have to have boundaries because clients will contact you literally 24/7. So you need to have some boundaries without a doubt. And I think sometimes you need to step back and understand that their problems are not your problems. And you can be very compassionate and understanding and an excellent advocate without taking all of that home with you, without their stress becoming your stress.
Does your family agree with that, hopefully?
It depends who you ask.
So tell everyone about your family. You're married, you have children?
I've been married for 20 years and I have four boys.
Very
The
nice.
oldest is 18 and the youngest is 10.
Now, you mentioned going out on your own. So you've been in business for yourself. What's the name of your law practice?
It's Ressler and Associates, and we've been in practice for 10 years with the firm. And presently we have four attorneys and three support staff.
So you're actually a small business owner in addition to being a full-time attorney. And how has that, transition been from just being a litigator who goes to court and works to represent your clients to also being the the boss, basically the owner of a business. What's that been like for you?
Well, thank God I have a husband who has an MBA because I think that's the only way I figured out how to run a business because I went to law school. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a business person, but I've learned a lot from him and he's helped definitely with as the practice has grown, I've needed a lot more help with running a business and dealing with employees. And one of the best things I've done was hire an office manager about 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm no longer writing out all the checks and dealing with office politics or interviewing candidates. And really things have made a big difference having an office manager because I'm not dealing with most of the administrative stuff day to day.
Now, if a client were looking to hire a lawyer in White Plains and they wanted someone who was 100% for them and not part of, there's a stereotype that all the divorce lawyers and all the family lawyers in Westchester really just sort of talk amongst themselves. Um, can that client know that when they hire Jessica Ressler, that they have you as opposed to just another lawyer who's part of this big hidden whatever it is, this big world of law firms and lawyers working things out behind the scenes? Are you on their side?
100%. And in Westchester, most of the attorneys do know each other, but that doesn't mean that we're making deals behind everybody's back. Our obligation and our focus is on the client and making sure the client gets the best deal. And clients sometimes get concerned if you're on good terms or you're friendly with opposing counsel. And what I tell clients is you want that. You want the attorneys to get along because that means you're more likely to get a deal done. When attorneys fight constantly and don't get along, that will impact your case and make your case much more difficult to settle.
I couldn't agree more strongly. And I hope you agree with what I want to say about myself, because I've known you since about when I started out in Westchester, about 2005, 2006. And I've tried to play that philosophy forward. And I do find there are lawyers who get personal and get hot under the collar, probably because their clients are the same way. And the clients really want to see a firebrand in the courtroom. And the clients are angry because their ex did this and this and this. And they expect the lawyer to take that same approach. And I've been clear with myself since day one that I'm not that kind of shark. I'm just not. And if I can reach across the table and work with Jessica Ressler or whoever, even though our clients don't see eye to eye, the case will work out better in the end. Now, am I tooting my own horn too much, or from your experience working against me as opposing counsel, do you think that I've said it consistent
Well,
with what you've seen?
you and I had many cases together over the years in Westchester County, and I always found you to be an excellent advocate without taking on the persona of your client. And there's no need to scream and yell to be effective. You always had excellent arguments and you're an excellent writer. And I know that everybody went to you for all of their appellate questions or intricate legal questions in family court. So I think that you don't need to be a screamer and yeller to get your point across in family court or any court for that matter. And most of the judges are very turned off by attorneys who act like that. And you can do a great job for your client with just having great law, arguing your points, and staying focused.
Now, one last question before we get to some nitty gritty discussion of child support. You and I also have in common having represented children. I was on a list called the Attorneys for Children list, and I think you're still on that list.
I am.
You get appointments from the court to represent children, correct?
Correct. I represent children in both Supreme Court and family court in Westchester County and Putnam County.
So if I'm a potential client, obviously a parent with a child support case or custody case or divorce or whatever, why should I want you versus a lawyer who does not represent children? What does that help you with? What does that bring to the table for you?
I think it brings perspective to the table because my job, if I'm representing a client, an adult client, is to make sure that I represent their interests to the best of their ability. But in doing that, I need to make sure that I explain to them the perspective of the other attorneys. So if it's a custody case and there is an attorney for the child in that case, I can say to them, you have to understand that the attorney for the child's position might be X, Y, or Z, and you need to see it from their position as well. And the court takes a very child-centered approach. So it's very important to focus on the child-centered approach, which is a little more difficult to do for attorneys that have never been an attorney for the child.
Great. So let's talk about child support as much as time allows. What's the key thing that somebody who's facing their first court date is coming up, they're scrambling, they're looking around to hire a lawyer, they're trying to get information and figure out if they even need a lawyer, somebody who either is bringing a case for child support or has been sued, basically served with a petition for child support. Talk about what the litigant might be going through before their first court appearance.
Sure. So first of all, it's very confusing if you're the one filing, because you need to understand that you can file in two different courts and you need to know which court you should file in. So you can file in Supreme Court if you've been married, or you can file in family court if you've never been married. And if you've been married, you have two options in most circumstances, family court or Supreme Court. And you need to know which is better for your case, and it really depends on your case. There are also many considerations, because if you're being served with a petition and you haven't paid child support, you might be served with a petition for contempt, in which case you're facing jail time, which is very serious, and you must get an attorney. And the court will appoint someone to you if you don't have the resources for something like that. But the child support petitions or applications are very serious, because sometimes they're not even brought by your former partner or spouse, they're brought by the child support collection unit. And if you fall behind with your support payments, you can be facing the loss of or suspension of your passport, of your driver's license, and it can affect every aspect of your life. So you really should take that kind of application very seriously.
Tell our audience what, in a nutshell, what's the difference between spousal maintenance and child support?
Spousal maintenance is support for yourself. So you're able to support yourself and pay your bills. And child support is money that's designated for your child, which is mostly housing, food, and necessaries.
Now, when you said spousal support, isn't it true that sometimes people do file for that in family court? They don't have to go through a divorce just to get spousal support.
Yes, that's correct.
Can you give an example of a circumstance where someone might actually want to file for spousal support in family court?
Sure. A lot of people decide to sort of bifurcate their divorce, and they want to deal, if they don't have any assets, then they may not want to go to Supreme Court. And it's a lot faster to go to family court. So they might file a petition for child support and a petition for spousal support in family court. And then once that's done, all they have to do is file for an uncontested divorce in the Supreme Court, because everything was done in the family court and there are no assets to divide.
So let's jump right into the nitty-gritty of child support. It's based on the number of children. It's based on a formula for income. Can you explain it in as simple as way as possible? Because we really don't have, hours and hours, and our audience is all busy people. How is child support supposed to be calculated under the New York rules?
Okay, so just to break it down in the simplest form, there's two parts to child support. There's a basic child support, which is a monthly payment, and then there are add-ons. So they're calculated differently. With respect to the basic child support, you take the combined parental income, so you add the mother's and the father's income, let's say, and then if you have one child for child support, it's 17%. Two children, it's 25%. Three children, it's 29%. Four children, it's 31%. Five children, it's 35%. And you calculate it, the cap in New York State right now is $163,000. And in many counties in New York, they are exceeding the cap. And in Westchester County, where I primarily practice, you normally see the court going anywhere from about $325,000 cap to about a $400,000 cap. And it's always a big source of discussion as to what cap could the judge potentially use in your particular case. And you really need to know the judge and you need to know the court you're in to understand what a likely cap would be for child support if the combined parental income is over $163,000 per year.
When you
The
say
other,
cap, you mean that the income, any income above the cap is not going to be included for calculating the obligation?
it depends on the judge, and they're called statutory F factors. And you have to make the argument that you need to go over the cap, because somebody making $1 million a year should not be paying child support on only $163,000 of their income. The other part to child support is the add-ons. So that's done on a pro rata basis. And that concerns items like unreimbursed medical expenses, dental expenses, optical expenses, college, any education, and childcare and camp. So those are important add-ons, and those are not included in the basic child support, and those need to be negotiated as well.
And by the way, I mean, I'm talking to you from Albany, New York, and there's often a misconception that the law is different downstate. But in fact, from my experience in Albany Family Court, Schenectady Family Court, Chenango County Family Court, where I've been recently, the law is uniform throughout New York State. Now, there are counties, as you just pointed out, Westchester is a somewhat wealthier county, where it's more common to have people come in with this maybe $1 million income for a family. But the law is the same. The law is written by the legislature for the whole state.
That's right.
And in your I know you have to keep up with this yearly. You come across cases from different parts of New York State that also will bear on deciding a case in Westchester, correct?
Correct. And the case law really says, it might cost more money to raise a child in Westchester County or Manhattan than it would in, say, Buffalo or other, upstate counties. And so they're taking that into consideration. And that's why the caps have been raised for certain cases with income much higher than 163,000.
Let's go back to the support collections unit, because I've had a lot of experience with that, but I'd like to hear you explain it a little bit. What is the support collections unit, and should payor parents be afraid of it? Should they try and avoid it, or is it something that can actually benefit the parent who's going to be paying the child support?
Most parents who are paying child support despise the SCU. They are a completely separate body from the court system. There are benefits, though. So clients who want to keep track of their payments because their spouse or former spouse does not keep good records. And there are spouses who say, you haven't paid me X. And they said, absolutely, I paid you X. The SCU is good for cases like that because they keep meticulous records and they will know exactly what payments have been received. If a parent wants child support through the SCU, they will get it. It's not something that the court has discretion to do. If somebody asks for it, they get it. However, it really is only effective if somebody is a W-2 wage earner, because if you have your own practice, they can't really garnish wages. It relies on that individual to voluntarily pay into the SCU, which a lot of people don't comply with. But if you have a parent that's not paying support, the SCU is a very good option because they will pull the wages from that client's paycheck or employer.
But isn't it true when you have someone who's falling behind on child support? Now we're switching back. I was asking from the point of view of the payor. But now I want to switch back briefly before we wrap up and looking at it from the point of view of the recipient, who is often the mother, and she's got all these costs associated with raising the child. And you said, somebody who's not a W-2 employee. Well, we're not talking about lawyers here. Let's talk about laborers. Let's talk about people who work off the books. Let's talk about guys. It's often guys who are working odd jobs, and they will only pay when they're ordered to pay it. And sometimes they will only pay in the courtroom. to a
Right.
representative of support collections because they're just not being proactive. So, from that mother's point of view, raising those children, isn't that another example of where support collections can be quite helpful?
Absolutely, because they can on their own file a petition for enforcement. So if the arrears get to a certain level, and it's different depending on every case, then they will file a petition and they will enforce the arrears, and they have all the records. So you don't even need to keep the records about what's owed.
Now, Jessica, if you're that custodial parent, right, with the children,
Mhm.
and you have all these expenses, and the father has not been paying in a while, um, what do you think should be the consideration if jail is on the table? If the judge asks that mother, "Do you want him locked up?" Tell those people what are the pros and cons of seeking to have that guy locked up versus letting him continue to stay out in the community.
Most people really don't want that other party locked up. What they really want is to be paid. But the threat of incarceration is usually what gets you paid. And when you appear in court, the judge will say, "Do you have any purge money? Can you come up with anything towards what you owe to keep you out of jail?" And usually, magically, they're able to come up with money to keep them out of jail. There are times when they can't come up with the money and the arrears are huge and they're incarcerated, and that really doesn't help anyone because they're not making any money when they're incarcerated. And then they come out and they still owe you that amount of money. So, really, people should try to be focused on getting paid and not sending that party to jail.
Um, I guess we do have time for one more question. What about in New York State, when the child is getting towards their 18th birthday? Should parents be worried that child support is about to end because the child is going to graduate high school, turn 18, maybe get a job? What are the considerations from a legal standpoint about these older children around the age of 18 and up to 21?
So, in New York, state child support ends at 21 by statute. And many people agree, and this can only be done by agreement, to extend child support to age 22 if the child is in college. So it's very important when you're negotiating agreements to make sure that the child support goes until graduation from college, because you don't want your child support ending before your child's graduated. And a lot of people um, don't remember to include that in the language. And there are other considerations too around emancipation, because now you get a lot of people who are working full time after high school and don't go to college. And you have a lot of parents saying, "Hey, I'm not paying child support anymore. My child didn't go to college," and they're working full time. And you have to go back to the agreement and look at the language and make sure that that language is very clear, because a lot of times that child needs to not just be working full time, but needs to be self-supporting. And then the issue is, well, are they self-supporting or not? Because if the language is just working full time, they could be working for minimum wage, and at age 18 or 19, it's very unlikely that they are self-supporting. So that emancipation language is extremely important. And another consideration too is the room and board credit, because if you're 18 to 21, you're likely in college, and one parent is likely paying for child support and college at the same time. So it's really important to make sure you have that room and board credit so that the parent who's paying for college and child support is not double paying for room and board.
Very good. Okay, well, we obviously can't cover every conceivable question that comes up, but that's what the phone is for, and that's what email's for. What's the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they want to follow up with anything we've discussed today?
Anybody can reach me by phone, the office, 914-761-2300, or by email, jressler@westchestermatrimonial.com. And I'd love to hear from anyone if they have any questions regarding divorce, family law in the state of New York.
And you mentioned that you're mostly in Westchester, but not exclusively. So if someone's watching this in the five boroughs or on Long Island, or maybe up, how far north do you go in your cases?
I usually don't go further than Dutchess County. but we
Yeah.
have a fair number of cases in Nassau County, in Manhattan, in the Bronx, in Putnam County, and a fair number in Rockland as well.
Great. All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot and I've enjoyed talking to you. And I'm really grateful that you spent time with me today talking about this interesting area of law. And we'll have to do it again sometime. So thanks a lot,
Absolutely.
Jessica.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to say goodbye now. And thanks to everyone who was watching. And of course, you can also reach me, Carl Birman, in my office in Albany at 518-952-0516. Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody. And